Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And I am so psyched about today's topic because let's be honest about meetings. Meetings are not the most fun part of business. I'm not going to try to convince you that they are, but the good news is that our guest today is making meetings a little bit easier, and specifically candidate interviews. Those kind of meetings, they're just a hassle to schedule, right? They're really super hard. So I like to say scheduling the meetings is really the front end of the recruiting process. And that impression on candidates makes a huge difference on their willingness to engage with you. So my guest today is Maran Nelson. She is the CEO, the co-founder of Clara Labs, based in Silicon Valley. She's been doing it for about 4 years. And we're going to talk with her about this concept of how you can improve your scheduling of meetings and candidate interviews. So let me tell you real briefly about Maran and Clara. So Clara is the business. It's essentially a scheduling service that will help you coordinate when and where and how your candidates meet with your employees and your recruiters. So it's kind of this very interesting blend of technology, always having a human in the loop. And that's what I think is very unique about it. We're going to talk with Maran about that. She has raised funding from some of the top venture capital firms in the world, names like Sequoia Capital, First Round Capital, Upside Ventures, and others. You've heard of these folks. And I think what's fascinating about Maran's background is she studied neuroscience and psychology at University of Texas at Austin, first-class school, and I'm sure that played some role in all this. So with all that build-up, Maran, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such an excellent introduction to what we do. I'm going to write it down word for word.
Well, maybe I'll come work for you one day. So
there we go.
Let's start with just a little bit about your personal story and kind of give the listeners a little bit of the backstory, kind of how you got into this, how you fell into this, or how you decided to pursue this, and then we'll go from there.
Great. So I even though it takes us a bit of a ways back, I always have to start with my co-founder. He's been my best friend since we were 15. He is the person, long time, Texas, born and bred, and he's the person who convinced me that technology was interesting. I'd been just a huge reader, and I thought I hated math and had interfaced very little with computers. And he was my first introduction to the idea that technology could really be used for good, and it didn't have to be scary, and it could be personable. That beginning really opened us up to the idea that one day perhaps we would together build technology that felt personable, accessible, and build some of those ideals that we'd had when we were young. So Clara obviously has been a big manifestation of that. I think more concretely though, right, Clara schedules meetings. Clara schedules meetings and works primarily with the recruiting use case.
And why did you choose the recruiting use case? There's so many meetings that we all are in every day. Why that specifically?
Totally. So I think there are two answers. Number one, the genesis of the whole company and the pain point around scheduling actually came from scheduling interviews, right? So getting down in the weeds with it, I had founded a nonprofit that has a fellowship. We interviewed tons of people to join our fellowship, and I founded this in undergrad at the University of Texas, and was constantly trying to go back and forth with these candidates, basically, right, to see who we would choose to be fellows in the organization. And at the time was complaining, as I had to do annually as we accepted these classes of fellows. And that was the inception moment, right, of wow, you know what? Scheduling is a huge pain in the butt, not only in this case, but in tons of use cases.
So it was born out of personal frustration, as so many great startups are.
Absolutely. And at the beginning, we thought it would be an easy thing to solve, which I think is another kind of stereotype you see, this idea of, surely you can spend 3 days just fixing that problem. And as you get into it, you end up realizing, to your point, it's not just about scheduling these interviews. It's not just one-off cases. Your audience, right? These people are building companies. They're building teams. Be they the CEO, the recruiter of the organization, they're responsible to people. We at Clara call them people, right? Designing technology to enable people.
Got it. So it could be sales reps, recruiters,
yeah.
et cetera.
And the recruiting focus was, for us, the absolute heart of what it means for a team or a company to take care of people lived in that part of the work, right?
So as I mentioned in kind of the tee up, it sounds like Clara has this really interesting hybrid model of using technology, but always keeping humans in the loop. For the listeners, can you just give a high level overview of how that kind of works, and specifically how you find the right balance so that it's scalable, but also works?
Yeah, and to make sure that folks have a sense, Clara, the interface that people have to Clara is via email, right?
Yep.
So this is that you would expect to have a back and forth dialogue about scheduling a meeting with a recruiter or with a CEO or what. Clara provides a service that has that dialogue and that for you. The way that we do that, to your point, is something we call human in the loop, which means that as our first layer, we're trying to parse whatever language preference you're saying, oh yes, next Thursday works, thank you. And we're seeing if we can figure out what it is that you're saying algorithmically, right? If we feel really confident that we know what you're saying, we know what the next step to take is, then we'll take that step automatically. However, if we want to make sure that the response is right? If we want to make sure that our prediction about the next action to take was correct, then we route whatever part of the response we may not be certain about to a contractor. That contractor works out of Clara's software, right? Sees that we've made this prediction about the response to whatever this is, right? We think that this is next Thursday, not next Thursday.
Right. So essentially you're using humans for the exception handling, which over time, as the system learns and gets better, should become a smaller piece.
Exactly. And at the beginning, it was truly all manual, just people typing and us starting to try to get the savvy to be able to model this conversation, to be able to make these intelligent predictions. And
what's an example of a really funky thing that one of your folks might see in an email when it comes to scheduling an interview? Like, give a really tough case.
Yeah, I think the toughest cases are that people have so much nuanced preference around when they might be available to meet, right? If something is really high priority, maybe they're okay with doing video calls, but if it's slightly less high priority, then they'd prefer to do it next week and they can come to you. Are you so enthusiastic about this candidate that you're willing to travel to meet with them as opposed to having them come to your offices, right? And I think when you come down to the language of this, you can imagine people interacting and saying, hey, so sorry, I'm about to be on vacation. I'll be out for 10 days. I can take that via call if this day works. Otherwise, let's wait until whenever.
Got it.
We are all familiar enough with Siri, right? The natural language processing is simply not at the stage where we can reliably believe that we're parsing all of that nuance.
Yep. So in terms of impact for a company that becomes a client of yours, what is the main benefit they can expect to see in terms of the relationship with potential candidates?
Great question. I think the biggest thing, and we see this especially for companies that are trying to move quickly and really prioritize employer brand and candidate experience, you want to be responsive to your candidates, right? You don't want to get overwhelmed. You don't want to let something sit for a couple of days. You don't want to accidentally forget to follow up with someone and end up losing something. There's a huge number of tiny little micro details that can be the make or break for whether or not you really have given a good face to that candidate, made sure they have all of the little details they need, made sure that the calendar invitation is perfect and in order for them, send them a meeting confirmation email the day before the meeting to check in, to make sure they have everything they need, confirm the conference rooms by making sure that you've actually booked those ahead of time, per your preference, right?
So you're really improving the candidate experience, which in a market like we're in now can make all the difference between engaging a candidate or not.
Completely. And even just from talking to our friends, we're familiar with this, or our own experiences interviewing at different companies, right? You know emotionally the difference between being taken care of and someone being on top of it and trying to make sure that you have everything you need to have a great experience, and then focusing on those opportunities for magical moments, those opportunities for connection. And really, really amping it up there. And I think that you can either be an organization that's really responsive, right? That lets yourself get overwhelmed, that lets yourself accidentally fall through the cracks with some things, is constantly apologizing for forgetting to send that invite or whatever the case may be. And because you're being responsive to all that administrative tedium, you aren't there for the, we should send this person flowers. We really want to close them. Or we should figure out what their favorite restaurant is and give them a gift card and let them know that we want them to go there with their spouse and be able to what it would be like to be on our team. And those are the moments of connection. If you free yourself up from the administrative burden, if you free yourself up from the responsiveness, if you have proactive, seamless solutions, you can really excel at that people quality of being especially thoughtful and intentional about designing a great experience.
The people theme really comes through. It sounds like not just in the product, but in the spirit and the mantra of your company. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. And going back to your first point, right? Like, what was the genesis of the company? And going back to being 15 years old, I think that's just about as authentic as it can get, right? You're fiddling around. Luckily, your audience didn't get to experience it. Fiddling around trying to even connect to this video call. There are all of these, there are all of these ways that technology is unintuitive to us. You just wish it would be simpler and more seamless and easier. And I think for us, Human in the Loop has been a way to really leverage humans for those cases that technology doesn't provide easy, intuitive, emotionally comfortable experiences or solutions to problems.
Yeah, I have read that even at Amazon, there's a whole team behind Alexa that designs and manages her personality, right? And the voice, the nomenclature, the vocabulary, her sense of humor. It's really like a living, breathing thing that they've had to continue to refine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As with any machine learning team, I think that that's a really important thing to point out, and I'm glad you brought it up. Teams that are truly trying to leverage technology to design great user experiences are familiar with how dependent they are on human input to train those systems to be smart, right, and to be intuitive. And at Clara, we've just tried to put that idea of dependency on people and working for and on behalf of people at the center of everything we do. And especially as a machine learning company, we found that that's crucial to designing that personality and that seamlessness.
I probably should have asked earlier, but how big is the business in terms of people?
We have a team of 25.
Got it. That includes the outside contractors, or just those are full-time?
Those are our full-time folks.
Got it. And so we've talked a lot about all the great stuff that's been going on. What have been some of the big challenges from a human capital standpoint or recruiting standpoint within the business, right? As you've scaled it, you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, just like every other company competing for talent. What have been some of the biggest challenges there?
Yeah, I think one thing I will say is that founding a company with a friend of yours is a good move, especially if you're lucky enough to have made friends along the way. So the beginning of our team was very rough and tumble us and a bunch of young friends just trying to make something work.
Mm-hmm.
I think as we've aged and matured and learned what it takes to build a real product, and to service real users, we have been able to use that base of energy, enthusiasm, mission orientation, and friendship, and build on top of it and build out the beginnings of our really awesome leadership team of folks who are senior, who have expertise, that has really allowed us to tackle this go-to-market phase of the business, where we're really bringing a lot of that product effort forward, and talking to folks like you about the fact that they have it, they can use it. This is not fairy tale. It's today, and that's, I think, all of it though being based on that mission centricity and core of people orientation has helped us design candidate experiences and people experiences at every step of the way that has been very thoughtful.
Is there a unique part of your own recruiting process internally that you could describe to people, just to give them a sense of how that works?
Good question. Yeah, one thing we have cared a lot about at Clara are our operating principles. As a company, we have been really diligent about trying to bring them through in all of those people processes that we design, be it all hands meetings or internal reviews or candidate experiences, and making sure that the people who are joining are a good values fit, really. I think a lot of people talk about the idea of culture, but I actually have a bit of a rub with the notion of culture. I think culture can oftentimes be exclusive, and people look for replicas of themselves. I think that really designing around operating principles, around values as a team, is a much more permanent.
So how do you do that? How do you operationalize that in terms of candidates that you consider adding to the team?
Absolutely. I think it's about designing your interview experiences in a way that works backwards from that set of operating principles that is consistent, and trying to bring that thoughtfulness to bear with what somebody's first 3 months are going to look like, answering all of the questions that you can on the front end to help ensure that somebody's going to be a good fit and set up for success. And again, for us, the simple answer is working backwards from our operating principles in tackling each of those processes, in determining our interview questions, in designing our candidate experience to be responsive, to be receptive, to be going above and beyond these opportunities to really sit down with people, answer their questions, and paint the picture of the future together.
Got it. I understand. Any big nightmares in terms of hires? And you don't need to name names, but have you found along the way of 4 years of doing this that someone slipped into the organization despite your best efforts to interview for those value characteristics? And then how did you handle it? What'd you do about it?
Jeff, I thought we were friends. It's also lovely. No, I'm totally kidding. I absolutely. I think that the times, of which luckily there haven't been a ton, but the times that I have made a mistake bringing on the wrong person was usually because that thoughtful process that we designed about deciding who it was that we needed, figuring out how to be true to our operating principles and asking folks questions,
Mm-hmm.
and really being consistent with ourselves about that, we, for any number of reasons, kind of skipped steps, right? It was because we knew someone from high school, or because we just really needed somebody for a role and we were scared we were about to lose them. Whatever the case may be, I think as soon as the integrity, if you're actually building these people processes with integrity, the next thing that you need to do is really trust them, and iterate on them, but be true to the process that you set up. And on the occasions that we haven't, that's where things have slipped.
And how long did it take before you realized you had made a mistake?
I think the better you are about setting expectations about what success means and making sure that you're communicating with the folks on your team, the easier it is to figure out that something's wrong pretty quickly. Generally, I think we, as with other teams, have been a bit too slow to acknowledge, this isn't quite working. There's a hopefulness of, well, maybe if we just slightly, rejigger this. And I don't have, this is a small team, a small company. It's its own DNA. But I will say from other folks, other founders, and other teams at our scale and at larger scales, as soon as you have the thought, right, of like, oof, I just don't think this person's working out. I don't feel the trust there.
Right.
You're probably going to be on a slippery slope downwards from that point on, and you get to determine how long that slope should last before.
But in general, I think we all wait too long before we make that decision.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this has been fantastic. How can people learn more about Clara, the product, and the company, or get in touch with you?
Yeah. So this is actually super great timing for us. We've been supporting startups in particular from our inception. As you might not be surprised, we're part of the Y Combinator network, and a ton of the folks who took the early chance on us as we were building out the product were startups. And we have now grown up such that we know how to build packages that are specific to teams that are trying to scale, teams where a bunch of people are playing hiring manager roles or recruiting roles, be they, the CEO of the company who's ushering that along, or some of your leadership needing to be responsible for filling their own spots. Sort of as you have the early recruiting folks maybe starting to join the team, maybe you don't really have them yet, maybe you have some external resource. We're calling it the Clara Recruits for Startups package. So you should email us at startups@claralabs.com if this is for you, but otherwise, happy to talk to all folks who are recruiting, building their teams, thinking about thoughtful candidate experiences, and they should just head to claralabs.com.
Fantastic. Maran, thank you so much for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And I remind our listeners to get ready, aim higher.